And so my experience has been is about every 5 years things shift. Whether it's the Great Recession or the COVID pandemic or whatever's happening, it's a buyer's market, a seller's market, and the secret that I've discovered in private lending is it's all about loan to
Have you
value.
ever wondered how lenders underwrite their deals? Well, in today's episode of the Never Lose a Deal podcast, I'm going to have a special guest on the show. This special guest is someone that I know that is a private lender. You're going to get a behind the scenes look at what it is that private lenders look at to be able to determine if they are going to lend on their next real estate deal. Now, without putting out any spoilers, I do want to let you know that this not only is going to be a very good podcast interview, but I want you to lean in because my guest is going to share with you how he has carved out a niche area of real estate to begin lending on deals that have become very lucrative for him. So once again, stay tuned. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Never Lose a Deal podcast. This is your host, Lorillia Brown-Phillips, and today I have a great treat for you. I have with me today private lender Scott Brown, and he is going to give us a very interesting conversation here on the Never Lose a Deal podcast. As always, I talk a lot about creative financing, and I think this conversation is going to be great because we get to hear the perspective from a private lender and what he's doing in this market currently to lend on private lending deals. How are you doing today, Scott?
Hey, it's a good morning. Thank you, Lorillia, for having me on here, and I'm excited to see where the discussion takes us.
Okay. So I'm going to let Scott give you all a background introduction of what it is that he does. I think that he will give a better insight and context of what he does. So, Scott, if you can tell the listening audience, what is it that you do in the private lending space?
Well, so um, I've been in lending for, I don't know, since 98. So that's about 27 years. And what I find in this space is that it comes down to changing with the market. The market typically tells us what kind of deals we can do, and so my experience has been is about every 5 years things shift. Whether it's the Great Recession or the COVID pandemic or whatever's happening, it's a buyer's market, a seller's market, and the secret that I've discovered in private lending is it's all about loan to value, in my opinion. And so I've done everything from owner financing to uh, traditional brokering. Back in the early days, we did traditional loans for a decade, and then with the Great Recession, I was forced to pivot, and so I started doing what I call bulk wholesaling, and we had a lot of success with that. And then I ended up with some leftover inventory, and then we did owner financing because what are you going to do with a home that needs to be sold but it's damaged and etc. And so we did owner financing, and then I pivoted over. There was a seminar company that were teaching people how to fix and flip, and they needed a lender in the back of the room, and I happened to be the guy, and we did about 1,000 brokered loans for fix and flip, and what later became DSCR loans. And then when COVID hit, that went away, and when that all went away, it was a pivot. And I don't want to mislead anybody. I'm like the next person is. I had to work through that. I did a small syndication, that was okay, and then I did funding on. I actually bought 6 flips myself, and that was a messy experience. I wouldn't, for me personally, I'm not doing that again. I ended up selling 3 of those off, and then I ended up flipping the other 3. And the truth of it is, it's not something that I would recommend someone do as a remote flip. I live in Arizona, and so I did those in North Carolina. And so there was a lot of, back and forth. But what I discovered in that process was I'd made some really good relationships with contractors. And I'm going to say, in my opinion, that's the secret sauce in flipping, is having the right contractors. And so what I started doing was funding deals for them. I didn't want to own the home. I wanted to own the loan. And so I started funding that. And we did that for, I don't know, a year and a half or so. And then the market slid. And what I mean by that, just to give perspective, is on one of the homes, the after repair value was 275. And so what ended up happening was there was a real estate investor in the area that sold 11 homes for 150,000. So I'm thinking we're exiting around 275. He sold 11 homes for 150. So what happens? That became a rental. We had to, you have to pivot, you have to work through it and figure out how you're gonna do that. And then I woke up one morning just with the realization that the market's soft. If the market is soft and it's a buyer's market, what happens is buyers want concessions. They want a discounted price. They want you to buy down the rate. They want you, even though you put 60,000 in renovation, they still have 20 things they want you to fix on the home. And so if the market's soft, what that was telling me is that I needed to focus on lower loan to value loans to get away from that kind of, I call it punishment.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where probate lending was originated from. I called an escrow officer and I just said, hey, I've got about $3 million in private lender capital sitting on the sidelines, mostly from mom and pop investors, and they're usually 25 to 50K at a whack. What would you do if you were me? And she said, I do probate loans. So that's the quick synopsis. So I'm going to let you ask some questions, but that's kind of how, excuse me, that's how I landed doing probate loans.
Okay. It was something that you said, and I like how you put it. You prefer to own the loan instead of own the home. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions is in the real estate space is a lot of people think that if you want to lend or become a private lender, I know I have clients who have a small, self-directed IRA. How important is it to have experience in terms of being a fix and flipper? So, don't want to assume. So, were you actually fixing and flipping homes before you started lending on them? Can you speak to
Yeah.
that?
Oh, yeah. So through the years, I had done, in my lifetime, I probably have done 6 fix and flips.
Hmm.
So I don't want to give the impression that I was an expert at it by any means. But I can tell you, I had loaned many, I've done over 2,000 loans, and I'd say at least a third of those were fix and flip loans. And so I just assumed that it wouldn't be that difficult. I'd get me a contractor and off we go. And there's a lot that I can tell you in the discovery of this, but I'm going to make a statement that helps the viewers understand. You would think it's just as simple as getting a contractor. The problem is that in the state of North Carolina, they have a law that allows anyone to be unlicensed and do contracting work up to $40,000.
Mm.
So what ends up happening is that it's extremely challenging to find a contractor that's licensed, bonded, and insured. And for years I preached, you've got to have licensed, bonded, and insured. It was just really challenging to find those because of the state laws. And I also ran into that on a deal I funded in Pennsylvania. You can basically, in the state of Pennsylvania, a person can just go in and fill out a piece of paper and they're a contractor with no experience. So I think you're onto something really, really, it's a strong part of flipping, and that is you've got to get that piece right.
Mhm.
And the blunt truth is, I should have never done those deals, and I got more experience than I wanted.
Okay. Yeah, because I've told clients that with the lenders that I'm working with, and I know offline, I told you, I'm working with lenders in asset-based lending space, and that's what they're requiring, for contractors to be bonded and licensed. Because what I'm finding is that there's contractors who's licensed, but they're not bonded. Or
Yeah,
like you said, if they're in states where it's not required, there you go. So it's just a matter of, a handyman now saying, I can, rehab a whole home. So, um, I definitely understand that. And I know you also, so now you're in the probate space. And I know you said that it's a not very a lot of people don't know about the probate market. I know I mentioned to you offline. I know with my experience, we source a lot of our deals in the probate space. So tell us how does it work from the lending standpoint?
yeah. So it's really a simple concept that I, in my whatever 27, 28 years, I've never heard a conversation about probate lending. I've never heard anybody talk about it. And I've been to a lot of events, and I've done a lot of deals. And when this escrow officer told me, um, I'm like you. I mean, anybody that's in our space, you have to really dig into it. And so I just really dug into it to understand it. But and maybe I'm going to oversimplify it, but I want you to look at it like it's just a bridge loan. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a bridge loan. And the difference with this kind of a bridge loan versus um, a lot of other bridge loans is that you're dealing with someone who's um, a, that has passed on and they've left behind an estate, and so the whole angle of probate is simply determining who has the right to manage and deal with the estate. And so, but the bizarre thing about all this is simply that in the research that I've done, and I've really turned over every rock that I can in this space. Surprisingly, it's very simple to avoid probate, and I'd like to tell the audience simple ways to avoid probate. If you get nothing else out of this, you ought to know this part. But the other part is the court has to decide who is, you know, the person that they designate to be the responsible individual, right? They have to designate them. We would know it as an
Executive.
executor,
Hmm.
right? But the net effect is once that part is decided, then what ends up happening is that um, if you look at the data says that the average household, now, when you use the word average, 50% of the people have more, 50% have less. But the when you look at the average, what ends up happening is that there's a huge segment of the population that don't have $1,000. So think about this for a second. You just inherited a property. It's got a mortgage on it, a payment has to be paid, and there's some deferred maintenance, and there's property taxes, and there's stuff in the house that has to be moved out. So all of a sudden, how do you deal with that? And so that's where a lot of real estate investors focus, is to buy these homes because it's a hot potato, right? All of a sudden somebody inherits this home. It's a hot potato. And they're like, I got to get rid of this thing. There's
Mhm.
a mortgage due. There's all this. I don't have the money. So there's a huge pent up demand there for people to get cash. And there's companies out there that offer cash. And I'm going to tell you, that's an amazing business what they do. If you're not familiar with that, they do cash advances. And essentially what they do is that if you need 20K, they want to be paid back 40K in 12 months.
Mhm.
So there's a gap in the market for just, good old lending. And what I would say to you is that, yeah, a lot of times you're in second position, but you might only be at 20 or 30% loan to value. And
Mhm.
so that to me is the secret. And most of these deals are usually 20 to $30,000. They're not huge, meaning you don't need a lot of private money to do the deal.
Mhm.
And they typically last usually between 6 and 12 months. And why? Is because the state mandates that you have a period where the creditors can come forth and make a claim. So I want to pause there, and then there's some things that I'd love to tell the audience, that simple ways to avoid probate. And I think this is the missing piece that so many people, they just don't understand, and they find themselves in that situation. And I'm going to tell you, I think as many as 80% of
Mhm.
households end up in probate.
Okay, because I have a lot to ask you with that, only because I'm familiar with the space, and in so many ways I want to go, but I want to keep it on task with the show. So, for example, from what I'm familiar with the space, because we've come across, families that they want top dollar for this home, even though they're in that hot potato situation, but they want top dollar. But mom and dad has owned the home for 50 years, bought it in 1969, has did no repairs to it. So, yeah, I know next door is selling, I'm in the New Jersey market for half a million or over a half a million, but mom and dad hasn't updated your home. So that's why I think it is a what you've carved out is great, because the families are, yeah, I do want to sell it, but I want to sell it at top dollar. But if it's not brought up to value, you're not going to get that top dollar. So what have you noticed that some of the families are using the money for? Is it just the regular, just the attorney fees and all the probate fees, or is it to bring it up to value to get the top dollar?
Yeah. So first of all, I don't want to mislead anybody. Is that this is a newer space for me, um, and what I mean by that is that up until 2025, I was doing the joint venture flips, and
Mhm.
I still have a couple of those that are cycling out. It's just I made a pivot, and but what I discovered in the niche was simply that it's way underserved. And yes, the biggest issue is that most people um, want cash to pay for an attorney, and so they need to pay for an attorney. And then when they start working with the real estate agent, what ends up happening is the agent gives them a reality check, right? And the reality check is that this thing needs a new HVAC system. It needs a new water heater. The toilets need new. I mean, if you want retail, then it's got to look retail. And
Mhm.
so you're right. It's all the little things that either need to be done or need to be discounted. And if you're discounting people, it's a buyer's market, and people want a deep discount. So if the home is not like really normal or like really livable, people want a deep discount. And so having a bridge loan, if you will, to come in and just fix all the needed things, I still think in this market, people are going to offer you less, but they'd offer you a lot less if those things aren't fixed. And there's an example I can give you of a deal that I'm working on right now that's in that exact scenario. But yes, that's why they need the money. It's mortgage payments, it's attorneys, it's cleaning out the house, it's updating the house, and it's waiting out the probate process.
Hmm. Hmm. Are there certain states you don't do? How is it going? Are you still trying to figure out how to build out your real estate portfolio? I know all the gurus online just told you, just put in a Google search, find an asset-based lender, and voila, you are going to find the lender of your dreams who's going to give you 100% financing, and you are off to the races being a real estate millionaire. But you know that isn't true. So this is what I want to share with you. There is a way that you can build out your real estate portfolio with no confusion because you want more than just a Google search. You want more than just talking to somebody on the other side of the computer who's pretty much just giving you a rate sheet and maybe some terms. I get it. And you are frustrated. But let me share with you there is an easier way. There's a way that you can build out your real estate portfolio and have that personalized touch that you have been searching for. You want more than just random Google searches and overused AI prompts that have been used all over the internet. You want to build your real estate portfolio with expert guidance, and you want to be able to be given lender recommendations that have been vetted and suited just for your situation. If that sounds like you, I want you to join me at my next workshop. In this workshop, I'm going to share with you my 3-step framework. In this framework, I'm going to share with you how I've been able to help clients, real estate investors, experienced ones, build their real estate portfolio with ease and eliminate all the confusion that they have been hearing online. So if that sounds like you, I want you to join me at my next workshop. You should see it here on this video, and I look forward to sharing that information with you. See you at the workshop. Are you doing the whole United States or certain states that you find are harder for the probate process than others? Because I know you did want to talk about probate, that process.
Yeah, so um, the thing that I'm going to tell you is that lending laws prevail in a lot of states, and so I think that was a really good question. It's probably one of the best questions you could ask me, and I'm going to give you the answer this way: is um, think of business purpose lending.
Mm-hmm.
Those that are in the space that understand that is this is not an owner occupied home. The person that owned it has passed on. So
Mm-hmm.
now the heirs own the home. So it is a non-owner occupied investment property unless one of the family members has moved in. And if a family member has moved in, I believe there's a case for showing it's a business purpose loan because you're doing business with the estate, and um, and the person that's living there does not have that loan in their name. So there's a lot of things that my lending background has taught me. But what I would say to you, to cut to the chase for your viewers, if someone was going to do this, you need to look for states that have a lending exemption. And I've been a licensed loan officer since I started. And um, lending laws are really, really tough, meaning if you do a consumer loan, there's the consumer is protected. Consumer simply means owner occupied.
Mm-hmm.
If you do non-owner occupied or business purpose, there's exemptions. And so I would tell you to pick a market where, so I live in Arizona, but I'm not doing these loans right now in Arizona. And people say, why not? Well, there is a workaround, and I'm going to give you my opinion of a workaround. Have
Mm-hmm.
you seen um, home equity agreements, the companies that offer home equity agreements, um, like Home Tap? If
Uh,
you
Go ahead.
go ahead, have,
Yeah, I mean, it to me, it's almost, I want to say borderline predatory because the homeowner could possibly lose their home.
well, I don't know enough about that part of it, but from what I understand, the home tap type programs are they'll let's say you have 50% equity and you
Mhm.
need 50 grand or 100 grand. They'll give you the 50 or 100, but they don't require payment. It's similar to a reverse, etc., but there's no payment required. It's just they participate in the equity. And
Mhm.
so from that point forward, they participate as a equity owner in the deal. And so I guess it could be seen as predatory from that standpoint. But the way they've done it is they've bypassed the lending laws. And what I'm getting at is that if you're in a state like Arizona, for example, where I live, it doesn't matter if it's owner occupied or non-owner occupied, or if it's even commercial. If you do more than a couple loans in a year, you've got to be licensed. Period. So how do you get around it? There's two ways you get around it in the state of Arizona. You don't charge fees, like you don't charge points. You just make interest. And so that's how a lot of the hard money lenders. And so if you came to Arizona to get a hard money loan, you'd be surprised. A lot of the lenders are charge you 13%, no points. Well, why? It's because the lending laws don't allow for it.
Yeah.
So how do you do like a probate loan in Arizona? Is you can do the same thing, is you can't charge points or fees, or you can do an equity participation, an assignment of equity. And so that's a whole nother discussion we could dig into. But my eyes were open to that by a guy that had made a lot of money doing these joint venture flips. So I don't want to get too far into the weeds in it, but if you said what state, I'm going to answer it. Find a state that has an exemption. I don't know, Alabama. Just find a state that has an exemption, and you can work in a state like that. And lending is lending. You don't need to be face to face with someone to do lending.
No, I totally agree. And you touched on something, and you know, that made me think because, like you said, um, the wording and the classification being business purpose. Because I'm wondering how are you protecting, your interest with the loan? Are you allowed to put a lien against the property just so you can make sure that the heirs, when they sell, you get paid the money? So how does that work?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so, again, going back to business purpose, I would never do an uncollateralized loan. Everything has to be collateralized. So, what you're doing is you're doing the loan with the estate
Hmm.
is the executor or the uh, person that the courts has designated to be in charge. You're signing with the person that has the authority to sign, but then what's occurring is it's collateralized to the property. They have the ability to encumber the property. And so you're going to go in second position, which if you say second position to a lot of people, they're like, nope, not touching that.
Hmm.
um, but it's all about leverage, meaning how leveraged is the property? What's the loan to value? So if somebody like the home I was telling you about, it was in a 55 plus community, and a person was trying to buy the home, but it needed like 20,000 of repair. Well, the um, lady's husband had passed on, and she was now in a memory care facility. And so the sons had to go to court and get the conservatorship, or power of attorney, if you will. And the issue is that their mom had a paid off home, but she didn't have the money to fix the repairs. So that was not a probate loan, but that was a loan in second position in a similar scenario that required court, and that a lot of people just like, nope, not touching this. But you can make good money doing these loans because when they call somebody else, they're going to be told no. A bank won't do a loan with a deceased person.
Mm-mm.
Many private money lenders, it's too messy for them. They haven't heard of it. They don't understand it. And so what ends up happening is they they end up being told no over and over again. And as they're told no, they're desperate. And so they're looking for a solution. And so what a loan like this does is it allows a family to get, 20,000, and you can charge points, fees, interest, whatever. And you can let the interest accrue while the home is listed for sale. But you tell me, it's a paid off home and they need 20K. How risky is that deal?
No, that's why I was just about to say that because a lot of the probates we come across that there's no mortgages have been paid off. Very rarely we found any that has a mortgage, and that's why my next question was going to be if anything is encumbered on the property is a reverse mortgage. So how does those work? I mean, will you not do the work? Because a lot of times with the reverse mortgages they owe more than what they're worth. So.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
In general, my answer is they have a reverse. I'm not interested because reverses over encumber a property
Mhm.
intentionally to protect themselves. And so in general, I'd say to you, no. But if the home was worth 400,000 and they had a reverse mortgage and they only owed 100, then there's at least another 100,000 of equity up to 50% loan to value. And kind of that's my threshold with these deals is up to 50% loan to value. And um, I just feel like, you can solve all kind of problems with low loan to value, and you don't need to be worried and concerned. I mean, if at a minimum the home went to foreclosure, up to 50%, investors are going to be swarming to get that deal. So I'm not too concerned about that part of it. But you're right. It's learning how to underwrite, and I'm going to make it super simple because I was creating a course and teaching people. I was going to teach people how to do private money lending, and what I discovered is that on traditional private money lending, especially on fix and flip, there are so many things that a person needs to know. And I woke up one morning and I just said, I can't put people in a position where they're taking their life savings and putting it to work, and they could miss a really critical thing and end up in a bad spot.
Mhm.
And so I pulled way back and I said, you know what? I'm not going to do that. I'm just I'm just going to do low loan to value deals, and you can take away 95% of what you would do to underwrite a normal deal, and you can just throw it in the trash. You don't need to worry about credit. You don't need to worry about income. You just don't need to worry about anything if the equity is there. And so that's why I love this whole niche of equity based lending. And frankly, I wish I had been doing this my whole career. And it took me all this time to discover it. And so what I'm saying to people is wake up to the fact that there are low loan to value loans that exist, and don't get trapped in these high loan to value urgent deals. You don't have to. Um, but I'd love to share with your audience a simple way how to avoid probate. Can I do that?
Yes, yes, you can.
So most people don't do the proper paperwork. And this is where my eyes have just been so opened. I've had a trust for a number of years, and just be primarily because people told me, you need a trust, and we had multiple properties, etc. And it's like, you need a trust to deal with this if something happens to you. Well, here's in there's so much, but I'm going to keep it super simple. Do you realize that if you don't have a trust and you have a will, people say, I got a will, I'm good. Um, and let me state, I'm not an attorney. I'm giving you my opinion. All right. They say, I've got a will, I'm good. Well, guess what? If you have a will, that is the quickest way to get yourself into probate. And what does probate mean? It means the court's going to decide what happens to your stuff.
Hmm.
Now, listen, the court's not taking your stuff. It's just they're taking away your options and your choices because you have to go through that process and you have to wait for creditors to come forward. So you can either go through that messy process that's 6 to 12 months, and in some cases it's 18 months, like California. And do you know that if you die in California and you don't have a trust or you don't do what I'm about to tell you, that they have statutory fees? And a statutory fee means they can charge you on a $500,000 home. The average attorney has statutory fees that the state allows them to charge, which is like $25,000, a $25,000 fee. Now I'm going to teach you a little trick here that is so simple, and each state calls it something a little different. So you can go to Chat GPT and figure out what in your state has it. But do you realize you can do what's called a beneficiary deed? Have you ever heard that term, Loria?
Yes, I have.
All right. Most people have it. So a beneficiary deed, all it does is that you record it and you just say who is going to be the beneficiary of this home and you list them out. Sally is going to be the beneficiary. And if you record that, that house avoids probate. Now, you're like, well, what's the big deal? The big deal is that you're not paying on average $5,000 to have an attorney step in. You're not waiting 6 to 12 months for creditors to come forward. And you can hire a real estate agent immediately, and you can encumber the property if you need a loan immediately. The heirs can. So it is a big deal, and it's simple. It can be avoided with a simple beneficiary deed. Now let's take that a step further. How do they avoid probate with the rest of their stuff? It's really simple. You just name your beneficiary. At the bank, you go to the bank, and there's a form that's called a POD, pay on death. It's just your beneficiary form. You fill it out and you say, at my passing, I want my wife to get this account, or I want my will to get this account. And you do that with all your accounts. That will avoid probate for the average family. Now, if you have multiple properties and you own a business and whatever, you need legal counsel and you probably need a trust, etc. But the point is that the vast majority of people, that keeps them out of probate. And I'm going to say that probably half of the probate cases could be completely avoided. And why am I telling you this? For your listeners that want to do something in the probate space, if you just learn this and you educate the community that way, they'll start sending you these deals because they're like, here's somebody that's an industry expert that's working to help others avoid probate. So naturally, they'll reach out to you when someone is, and you say, and if you have a client that's in probate, we'd love to help them work through that with a bridge loan to get them through this process.
Well, that right there is, I mean, that right there, if you didn't take anything away from this podcast episode, that right there was was a trip to some expert who would have charged thousands and thousands of dollars, because right there, that right there was gold. Like that right there was gold. Because like you said, if they're the average family, and New Jersey is one of those states similar to California where you have these fees that are just built in. So thank you so much for that, Scott. Before we wrap up this episode, Scott, is there anything else you want to share with the listening audience, or what you're doing, how you're working with people, how they can reach out to you?
Yeah, for sure. So first of all, my website, you can either find me one or two ways, is wefundprobateleans.com or usaprivatemoney.com. And we've got the nugget that I would drop for your listeners is just go in and look at our blog post. I have 27 blog posts that go into a lot of detail on this topic, and it's like a master class on what is probate, how do you work with siblings, and what do you do in this situation. I've created all these different blog posts that just educate the consumers and help them understand this process. And I would just say that someone that is fortunate enough to listen to this episode is they ought to do the simple things they need to do to first avoid probate, like record a beneficiary deed, or you know you should have a will, and you should you have a trust? Well, that's up for you to decide. But if you want to trust, there's simple places like willandtrust.com. They're like $400. You could go, and if you wanted even more affordable, you could go to a place called Rocket Lawyer, and for like $30 a month, you can get a subscription to Rocket Lawyer, and then you can set up your trust for $30, and then you can cancel Rocket Lawyer. The point is that you ought to take action to do these things and get yourself out of that category. And then I would just say to people is that if they have idle or anxious money sitting on the sideline, it could be 25, 30K. Um, you can go and be a lender to families that really need help at this time of need. And if that's not something that you're comfortable with, there's people like either you or me that they could network with. And so I'd leave you with that is that this is an underserved niche, and it's only going to grow with the baby boomer generation tsunami that's coming.
Exactly. That's why I just had to have this you on the show because when I saw you posted, I was like, wow, that's really interesting. Because I mean, I'm like, I definitely see the need there because I understood the space. I'm like, wow, that is like so
Yeah.
genius.
And listen, if you've got a deal and you don't quite know how to put the deal together, let me help you. And we can
Yeah.
split deals or do whatever. But I'm happy to work with wherever a person is, whether they want to split a deal, or they want to fund a deal, or they just want to learn how to do the deals themselves. You should pay attention to this because it's underserved. And literally, there's 2 million households that went through probate last year. 2 million.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Scott. Thank you for coming on to the Never Lose a Deal podcast. Scott has shared with you all the information that you need to reach out to him. As he mentioned, if you are interested in putting, your money to work, we talk a lot about self-directed IRAs here on this podcast episode, and so let's have a conversation. You know how to reach me. Scott has given you his info. And until the next time, please remember to rate and or subscribe to the podcast, depending on where you are listening, whether it's on YouTube or on the podcast platforms. Until the next time, well, thank you for tuning in. Man, what did you think about that episode? That episode was out of sight. I don't know about you, but I'm going back and I'm going to listen and I'm going to take notes. I mean, the last thing that Scott shared with us was worth the 30 minutes that it took to watch and listen to today's episode. Now, once again, this is what we talk about in the Never Lose a Deal podcast. But bigger than that, these are some of the conversations that we are having behind the scenes in my creative finance circle. And I don't know about you, but are you a part of the creative finance circle? If you want to learn more about the creative finance circle, there's going to be a link right below this video where you're going to learn more about how you can get these behind the scenes conversations. Imagine having a private lender who will literally walk you through how he or she underwrites deals to be able to create big profits for their real estate wealth. And that is what we're talking about in the Creative Finance Circle. So once again, this is Lorillia. I hope to see you in the next in the next podcast episode.